Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, where we're going to be talking about the future of IT services. My name is Ellie Elphick, and I am the Manager of Marketing and Communications at Buchanan Technologies. In addition to myself, and to provide expert insight on this topic, we are also joined by Buchanan's Director of Support Center Services, Tyler Hayes, and Director of Cloud Strategy, Chuck Ma. Before we dive in, I do have a couple of housekeeping items to cover. Every attendee will be automatically muted, but if you have a question during the webinar, we encourage you to use the chat function below. And time permitting, we will have a quick Q&A session at the end of the presentation and address some of the most common questions we received during the webinar. Also, please be sure to check out some of the resources and documents that we've uploaded, as they will be relevant to the topics that we discussed today. And you can feel free to download those during the webinar and reference them throughout and after. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the webinar. Let me get these slides pulled up and we'll get started. So the unprecedented challenges of 2020 and beyond have certainly made an impact on how businesses consume IT services. Earlier this year, Gartner released their top strategic technology trends for 2021, which you can see on the screen now. While these are referred to as trends, every single organization should critically examine how these operational concepts fit into their IT strategy and make a plan for adoption. We will discuss today how, at a high level, organizations should embrace people-centricity for both internal and external stakeholders by providing location-independent services while operating in a resilient delivery model. We're not going to take a deep dive into each subcategory, but instead, we want to provide you with some strategies and tactics that you can immediately begin incorporating into your own business to meet these objectives. So the first theme we're going to touch on is people centricity, which from our perspective really focuses on the user experience. As we know, people are an organization's most precious asset and typically represent a broad spectrum of stakeholders within a business, including employees, customers, suppliers, partners, and more. Tyler deals with this on a day-to-day basis in his role as Support Center Director, and is here to help us learn how companies can embrace this people centricity model to provide an unmatched end user experience. So Tyler, where should business leaders start when developing a people-centric strategy for their organization?
Awesome, thanks, Ellie. A great place to start is to take a step back and identify all the user personas that exist within your business. As you mentioned, this could include employees, suppliers, partners, really anyone who interacts with your business. When we look at user personas, there's a couple key factors that you want to consider. First is the generational preference. This is probably the most important consideration when establishing user personas. There's some really unique preferences and expectations when comparing someone born in 1970 and someone born in 2000. A millennial who grew up with technology is going to approach work in a very different way than someone who may have adopted technology throughout their life and career. In addition, the tolerance and patience for these individuals can be vastly different when dealing with technology. When you look at it from a customer service perspective, you want to make sure you're meeting all of the expectations. The next thing to consider is your support channel or method of communication. Here you should start by taking a look at what you offer today for communication channels. Does your contact strategy empower those interacting with you to their preference, or do you have a one-size-fits-all approach based on the business's preference? Again, when you think about generational preferences alone, there's a major shift in Gen Y and Gen Z to consider digital channels. You may be looking at including self-help pages, web chat, and AI and automation to help with speed and efficiency. There's also a shift to peer-based support rather than authority-based support. The use of collaborative channels like Slack, Microsoft Teams, they really stand out in the workplace, but it's really nothing new. If you look at the last 10 years, crowdsourced solutions have disrupted industries all over. How we travel, shop, donate and invest money, or research, it's all moved to a highly digital and collaborative platform. Finally, when we look at the applications and how they're used by each of our users is related to the specific job function. Generational preferences aside, over the last 2 years, the workplace has never looked more unique. This extends to more than just where we do our work, but also when and how. With a new digital workplace having emerged, we need to understand how technology can continue to support a collaborative and high productive environment. Let's consider the users of your services and what their individual use case is. A C-level executive has a unique set of expectations that's really driven by the urgency and the use. And that comes through in the applications they use. In comparison, a member of the sales team may be consistently traveling, relying on mobile applications to perform work while on the go between meetings. Other users, they may not have a dedicated workstation, and they might rely on hosted applications and roaming profiles that are available when they need to access through a kiosk. And really, at the end of that access, they need that to reset quickly and be available for the next user pretty well right away. Once you have a good understanding of your user personas, including the technology that you need to satisfy the different user requirements, you can take this information a step further and create a total experience strategy for your business. On screen, we're now showing a total experience strategy, which is going to consist of 4 categories: a multi-experience, a user experience, the customer experience, and finally, the employee experience. Businesses should look at all these categories and ensure they're working together to identify and solve complex business challenges. By transforming experiences across your entire organization where all these pieces intersect, you're able to tie your technology to employees, customers, and users and really create that total experience. So what should you consider when you're thinking about your total experience strategy? First, to have a look at the alignment with your customers. Using digital tools like surveys, chatbots, apps, and self-help portals give you more visibility to what your customer experience looks like, and you can shift and adjust your processes to resonate more with the customers and multiple personas. Next, you can aim to enable your employees. With a strong employee experience, employees will be more engaged in the success of their department or location, and there'll be more support for the overall company product or solution. Next, consider the user experience. So you want to consider the design of apps and usability of products and how these can be more intuitive to use, therefore reducing the effort, increasing the engagement, and driving satisfaction. Finally, you want to take a look at how this comes together with the multi-experience. And that's where it all comes back to tying together the customers, the employees, and the partners. You'll reap the benefit of improving performance and versatility.
Thanks, Tyler. So once businesses have identified user personas and implemented a total experience strategy, they will want to ensure that this strategy continues to work for their organization and more specifically, their end users.
Right. So here, businesses will want to consider their user satisfaction strategy. This really begins with making sure that you have a platform to collect feedback from your end users. Most common way we see this is through an end of activity survey, such as a closed ticket, and a few simple questions to get the feedback on how things went. This gives you a very consistent pulse on your business to assess if the strategies you're using are the right ones for your business and its community. I always like to come back to the idea that the users and staff at the front line often, if not always, have the best insight on how things are going today. And that information becomes necessary for business leaders to plan for tomorrow. In addition to things like user satisfaction surveys, it's great to include a portion on an annual employee satisfaction survey to get a more complete perspective on how things are going. You may find a tool you're investing in because you believe it's huge value to your front line. It simply isn't. Following that, having a vehicle to receive that feedback is a great start, but it has to just be the start. If you're not willing to spend the time to analyze the feedback on multiple levels, and then take the time to follow up with the submitter to really understand and in many cases repair the situation, you're leaving a lot on the table. I always like to look at it this way. Someone cared enough to take the time to tell me how things are going. I need to match, if not exceed, that level of care for what they had to say in order for the business to improve. Once you have this tool to solicit feedback, as well as the process to analyze and follow up on that feedback, it comes down to decision makers strategizing and implementing changes to improve the overall user experience.
So, in summary, here are the 3 strategies that we recommend to businesses seeking to provide people centric solutions to their users. Execute the tactics for identifying user personas, build a total experience strategy, and establish processes that will solicit feedback to continuously improve the experience for your users. This will go a long way in adopting the right solutions and processes to bolster people centricity across your organization and provide a superior end user experience. So now we're going to move on to the second theme and discuss location independence. So new ways of working mean that employees, customers, suppliers, and everyone across the business ecosystem can be located anywhere, but this is only possible with the right technology. To discuss this theme, we're now going to bring in Chuck, who helps customers adopt and manage technologies that support their remote workforce day in and day out. So, Chuck, we know that adopting the right tools and technologies is more critical than ever before, especially in today's hybrid or fully remote work environment. Can you give our audience some insight as to the types of solutions they should consider bringing into their tech stack to foster a location-independent business model?
Sure, Ellie. Well, first I'd like to talk about some of the drivers that are making businesses really dig deep into this concept of location independence. More than likely, your workforce has become distributed or remote to some extent. And the pandemic was the catalyst to this, as working from home became the norm instead of the exception. We also have a global workforce and are regularly crossing multiple time zones. For example, workers in Dallas, Texas interact with their counterparts in other continents like India, Europe, and Asia. So this requires flexibility in working hours to allow for meetings and conference calls. And even before the pandemic, businesses were experiencing labor shortages. And the information workers that are entering the job market today, the Gen X's, Y's, and Z's that Tyler mentioned previously, they have a much different approach and attitude to working than our parents or grandparents did. Today's workforce really values work-life balance and would much prefer to be location independent too. So because of this, they desire roles that don't tie them to a physical office or desk. Remote work has caused traditional shift work to become shifted work for some roles. So if you're in a direct service role, such as a help desk agent or an assembly line worker, well, then you likely won't have the option to shift your working times. But for a knowledge worker or information worker, this could take on a whole new meaning. So for example, an employee who normally worked a typical 9 to 5 office job might now work at home with other family members and tend to day-to-day household responsibilities. Because of this, some or all of their work would be completed outside of typical business hours. They might be completing their work between the hours of 5 to 9. So these factors, working from home due to the pandemic and the global and new workforce, are key drivers that businesses must be ready to address. So what you have to do as a business leader is to take a step back and ensure that the tools and processes you've implemented during the pandemic aren't just a stopgap measure or a patchwork of solutions. Rather, you want to make sure that each piece of technology you've invested in fits into the overall strategic purpose for your organization. The technology and solutions have to meet the needs of the business, and they must work together seamlessly to provide any long-term benefits for your users, especially with the work from home model. After all, it's predicted that over 20% of the workforce will still be working remotely through 2025. So to ensure your business remains competitive and sees results, you need to equip your users across all locations with the tools and support they need to be productive at any time. Knowing this, I wanted to share with the audience some of these key tools and technologies that will help create a solid foundation to support location-independent organizations and users. I'm going to discuss it in two sections. So first, the technology and tools you'll need to provide to your end users to create a productive and highly functioning remote work environment. And second, the technologies that you as a business will need to invest in to support those tool sets. So the first set of tools we're going to explore focuses on collaboration and productivity. This is a major consideration for companies that operate remotely, as collaboration and productivity are two key drivers that will generate success for your business. When we speak about technology and tools for end users, we need to talk about smart workspaces. So what are smart workspaces? Well, those are high performance collaboration platforms that aim to connect your teams so that they can work collaboratively anytime, any place, anywhere. So it'll use technologies like the cloud, software as a service or SaaS, and other innovations. Microsoft, Google, and AWS are leading the way in this area, and even Dropbox is also jumping into the ring. And at Buchanan, we've been helping customers adopt the Microsoft 365 platform and Windows 10, which serves as a foundation for their modern workplace initiative. And that's what their version of the Smart Workspace is. So this includes the adoption of Teams, SharePoint Online, Power BI, along with the usual Exchange Online for email and Office desktop apps. The technology and tools in the Smart Workspace provide the platform and access to the data, applications, and tools that they need to get their job done. Google has a similar platform that includes Meet, Drive, Gmail, and their web-based apps like Docs and Sheets. And regardless of which platform is in use, companies must also integrate video and teleconferencing solutions so that virtual meetings can be scheduled for multiple and even hundreds of individuals, allowing participants to join from anywhere.
That's great information, Chuck. Thank you. So the next set of tools we're going to discuss are centered around secure remote access, and this is a biggie. It's one thing to provide your users with the appropriate tools and technologies, but you are putting your business at risk if they cannot securely access them. So Chuck, what are some measures that our audience should consider when it comes to securing their remote workforce?
Well, so one of the most helpful tools you can have in your arsenal of security technologies is a virtual private network or VPN solution. The key for VPN is making it easy for users to start their VPN client and gain secure access to their environments. This is the ideal solution for organizations needing to accommodate employees working from home. A lot of companies had VPNs in place for a limited number of users, but with a dramatic shift to working from home and working remotely, they became overloaded. Now, another tool somewhat related to VPN and that has become quite popular as of late is the Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, or VDI. And also there's Desktop as a Service, or DaaS. So the VDI technology enables organizations to deliver desktops via virtual machines, hosted on premises or in the cloud, and are managed from a central server. Users access the virtual desktops through VPN or through remote desktop, or both. And so that'll allow them to reach their on-premise data and applications. Desktop as a Service, or DaaS, is similar to VDI, but is provided as a managed service from cloud vendors. With DaaS, virtual desktops are hosted on managed cloud infrastructures, and for users, they'll still have the same process to access their data. Another option is tied to the Smart Workspaces that we just discussed. So these portals, or software as a service, gives users, both employees or external groups, secure access to files, documents, and applications. SharePoint and Teams, Google Docs, and Meet, they all integrate with the directory services of the business. And that'll allow permissions to be managed by an administrator, ensuring that users will only have access to their specified data. And while VPNs are a great way to allow users remote access to on-premise or cloud infrastructures, they don't really address the SaaS tools. So to further protect your business, it's always a best practice to secure those platforms too. One of the first levels of user security is multi-factor authentication, or MFA. So using an authenticator app on your mobile phone, a USB or key fob, or even SMS text messaging allows users to validate who they say they are in order to securely access applications and files.
Thank you, Chuck. I now want to move right into talking about quantifying the digital experience. I know this is a key in location-independent strategy, as this is where you will really dive into the experience that your users are having. To discuss this, I'd like to bring Tyler back into the conversation. So Tyler, from your perspective, what are some tools around the digital experience that businesses should be considering?
For sure. So for this, I think it's extremely important to have the technologies in place that monitor the digital experience that your users are having. However, even to take a step before that, you really have to first identify what the data sets are that are important to you and where to find that information within those technologies. I really think the technology you should start with or rely on to help you deliver the service is such as your ERP, your CRM, or ITSM is probably a great place to start. those tools all have such a huge role in helping you understand your business and execute on it every day. Within those tools, they can help you visualize specific data about customers, partners, employees, all through dashboards and reports, and really no matter where they're located. In some cases, you may even want to sit above all those tools with a consolidated view using a tool like Microsoft's Power BI and having integrations into each of those key systems that I mentioned. As you have these insights, you can make improvements to your existing processes to create a better digital experience for all your users. Understanding your business will allow you to further introduce and mature those technologies and processes that lead to an improved total experience at every instance. For example, you may notice a longer resolution time for an issue that is a bit more complex due to several systems being used, going through different work groups, and just different stops along the way. By understanding the breakout of each of those tasks and each user that has to come into play, you'll be able to identify trigger points that you can add automation or improvements and ultimately drive a better user experience. Expectations in businesses are evolving at a record pace, and as business and thought leaders, we really need to keep up. If you're ever in a position to answer a question on why something is the way it is, and your answer is because that's how we've always done it, you may have already fallen behind.
That's a great point. So to summarize this, tool sets that support collaboration and productivity, secure remote access, and the digital experience are all critical to reinforcing a location-independent strategy. Now let's focus on the technologies that businesses need to be able to support those tool sets. Undoubtedly, remote working and location independence as a whole would not be possible without the cloud. So Chuck, what technologies should businesses contemplate when assessing their cloud environment or a move to the cloud?
Well, when talking about location independence specifically, we need to examine some of the options provided by the cloud infrastructure. In particular, the distributed cloud and edge infrastructure are two fundamental components to take a look at. Traditionally, companies have invested in co-location or their own data centers to house their IT infrastructure. And for companies with multiple locations, they would have local servers and networking infrastructure, and those were needed for performance issues. So now we have to view our workers not just from a remote or branch office, but also from a wide variety of remote locations. Distributed cloud is a public cloud service that lets companies run public cloud infrastructure in multiple locations while still allowing management from a single specified location. And with this targeted, centrally managed distribution of public cloud services, your business can deploy and run applications or individual components in a mix of cloud locations and environments that best meet your requirements for performance, regulatory compliance, and more. And perhaps more importantly, a distributed cloud model is ideal for edge infrastructure and computing, which is where companies run servers and applications closer to where data is being created. By placing computing services closest to these locations, users can benefit from faster, more reliable services and reduced latency, while companies benefit from the flexibility of a hybrid cloud solution.
So really, the three strategies that we recommend our audience consider to strengthen their business's location-independent strategy include enhancing the employee experience in a perimeterless work environment using digital experience monitoring, endpoint analytics, self-service provisioning, and remote troubleshooting tools. You will also want to adopt team structures, processes, skills, and tools to drive business model innovation using a digital-first, location-independent strategy. And finally, it is critical to adopt distributed cloud and edge technologies. This will enable the building of a blended workplace to seamlessly move work environments between physical and virtual locations. Now let's move on to our third and final theme of today's webinar, resilient delivery. Businesses must have the ability to adapt or pivot in a dynamic business environment. Failure to do so can result in antiquated technologies, customer distrust, and an overall lack of competitiveness. Tyler is going to give us some insights into where business leaders should start when evaluating their technology adoption and delivery methods to make them more responsive and agile.
Yeah, so what we want to focus on here is shifting to an intelligent, composable business. What I want you to think about when you think about composable business models, They're like a collection of interchangeable building blocks, like Legos. In this scenario, the building blocks would be the tools, technologies, and processes that are added and rearranged to meet the needs of the business. There are 4 principles of a composable business: the discovery, modularity, orchestration, and autonomy. And then the ultimate goal is to use these principles to drive superior business outcomes that are timely, relevant, and contextual. Let's take a look at these 4 principles a little bit more closely. When we consider discovery, that's allowing businesses to react faster by sensing when a change is happening. Modularity helps businesses achieve greater agility with interchangeable components. Orchestration provides the capability to mix and match business functions to respond to changing needs. And autonomy creates greater resilience throughout independent business units. A really common example of seeing effective composable business practice in play that we really see on a daily basis is the connection between human resources, IT, and facilities when someone joins or leaves an organization. This process is often kicked off by HR, and within a tool set with the right processes and technology, we can quickly see a new hire approval create a series of events, including hardware fulfillment, physical space and security preparation, and access to all the various applications and software required for someone that's going to begin on day 1 of their new job. In reverse, during an offboarding, we can quickly see those steps happen, effectively minimizing risks to the business and maintaining a high level of compliance. In fact, according to Gartner, organizations that have adopted a composable approach will outpace competition by 80% in the speed of new feature implementation by 2023.
So in addition to embracing a composable business model, another key factor that should be assessed when striving for resilient delivery is examining how an organization makes business decisions. In a recent survey, Gartner found that 65% of decisions are made are more complex, meaning involving more stakeholders or choices than they were just 2 years ago. Chuck, what advice would you give organizations that are seeking to rethink their decision-making strategy?
Well, to re-engineer decisions in a way that deals with the higher complexity and uncertainty, good decision-making needs to be more connected, contextual, and continuous. So what does connected mean? Well, it means that decision-making needs to become much more connected on all levels. Effective decision-making is also much more inclusive and collaborative, taking all necessary stakeholders into account. So to that end, the traditional definition of stakeholders has to be re-examined and expanded. And secondly, decision-making should scrutinize multiple aspects of a business opportunity and take place where it matters most to your customer or organization. And alternatives need to be evaluated in a context-sensitive manner beyond the scope of the individual event or transaction. So this means that organizations need to take into account as many relevant factors as possible. These factors can include financial, HR, KPIs, competitors, and even more. So there can be a lot more data to collect to make an informed decision. And finally, decision-making is becoming a much more continuous process. Because of this, organizations need to keep their options open and must be as responsive as possible to opportunities and disruptions. I could compare this to the approach to a chess game. So when I play chess, I'm always trying to think ahead about the possible moves to make and what my opponent will be making. And I might be able to see, 2 or 3 moves ahead. But grandmasters and pros in chess, they're able to see patterns and think even further ahead, 10 to 15 moves, and even to the point of seeing the end game. So this helps me understand why decision-making is continuous, because the business decisions we make affect our business, affect our competition, and the marketplace. And it may make an impact on our next decision. Decision-making needs to be a trusted, reliable core capability for every organization and its people. It also needs to be effective and efficient. What we have outlined on the screen may seem daunting, but being indecisive is actually even more dangerous to organizations. Without making effective and efficient decisions, the organization can become stagnant, adrift, or blind to changes in market conditions, customer perceptions, and citizen behaviors. Ultimately, decision-making that is re-engineered to be connected, contextual, and continuous accounts for uncertainty and improves our ability to add clarity to previously unclear considerations. It becomes a competitive differentiator. If you can handle more uncertainty than others comfortably and with skill, then you have the ultimate advantage.
So what we want to reiterate here, I think, is that decision-making that is connected, contextual, and continuous can result in a host of business benefits, most notably providing you with the ability to confidently make data-driven, real-time decisions that will give you a competitive edge. Well, this couldn't be a webinar on the future of IT services if we didn't talk about automation. So that's what we're going to focus on for the remainder of the webinar, and specifically hyperautomation. It is no secret that business executives are demanding a path to digital operational excellence. That said, Tyler is going to discuss how organizations should approach hyperautomation to improve their operational resiliency.
For sure. So hyperautomation becomes a byproduct of having those strong composable business models we just spoke about. Competitive pressures for efficiency, efficacy, and business agility are forcing organizations to address their back, middle, and front office operations. And organizations that neglect to adapt will struggle to remain competitive or to differentiate. Automation is a key to achieving operational excellence and resiliency. However, automating an enterprise today is reaching beyond just task automation and is now more focused on hyperautomation. Gartner defines business-driven hyperautomation as a disciplined approach that organizations use to rapidly identify, vet, and automate as many business and IT processes as possible, and involves the orchestrated use of multiple technologies, tools, and platforms. We've put some hyperautomation technology examples on the screen, but keep in mind the goal with hyperautomation is to combine as many technologies as possible so they work synergistically to enable your workforce, improve digital agility, and realize that ROI. As technology continues to advance, the idea of hyperautomation is something businesses must take a close look at. A great example of hyperautomation in action are the various chatbots and bot frameworks we see in place to support businesses. In an advanced form, chatbots are going to be interacting with multiple systems through complex integrations to perform tasks that very quickly and accurately. Technology today is built to be leveraged in this manner, and through available APIs and connectors, we can see a singular UI controlling many of these systems at once to give the best outcome. A key learning on automation and really adoption of any practice in a continuous improvement effort is that you must first identify the need and then the solution. On a macro level, it's great to start with the end in mind, meaning that we have that goal of a highly efficient, autonomous, and synergistic digital workplace. But to achieve that end state, you need to begin on the micro level and through an acute understanding of your business, solve for it one aspect at a time.
Thank you, Tyler. So in summary of the resilient delivery discussion, here are 3 tactics we want our audience to consider. First, you want to critically examine where you can build a more timely, relevant, and contextual organization, therefore operating by a composable business model. Second, you need to re-engineer the decision-making process by making sure that the data points you're capturing are readily accessible or delivered in an automated manner so that stakeholders can make timely business decisions and effectively respond to changing business demands. And last, we want you to be thinking hyperautomation at all times. Every business and IT process that you are able to automate within your business, you should. Choosing the right tools and services to automate end-to-end processes will allow you to achieve operational excellence by helping you save costs, better serve your customers, and ultimately just be a more relevant and competitive company in a digital-first world. Well, I think that just about covers everything we're going to talk about today. I really want to thank Tyler and Chuck for taking the time to share their valuable knowledge and insights with us. Just to recap, I've put every tactic and strategy that we discussed today on the screen. The key thing, again, that we want our audience to walk away with from this webinar is the idea that business and IT leaders must focus on people-centricity for both internal and external stakeholders by providing location-independent services while operating in a resilient delivery model. We hope that the information presented today gave you some ideas on ways that you can apply some of these current technology and IT trends to your business to help achieve this. Now, I know that this is a lot of different concepts and we threw a lot of things out there. So if you aren't sure where to start in your journey to future-proofing your IT strategy and business as a whole, Buchanan can help. We offer a wide range of services that address many of the topics we discussed today. Our experts can assess where your technology currently stands and provide strategic guidance on next steps to achieve operational efficiency and resiliency. So we have a little bit of time left, and now I think we're going to go ahead and jump into just a few questions that came in. So first of all, I think this first question is for Tyler. So Tyler, can you explain multi-experience or give an example? How is it different from a total experience?
Yeah, so the multi-experience, and I don't want to oversimplify, but the multi-experience really starts with the digital experience. It's the multiple systems that work both front-facing with the users of the systems or in the back end, how they all work together. That really builds your multi-experience. So kind of look at it as the digital experience in a sense. The total experience builds on that, but then it also pulls in everything else. The employee experience and how an employee interacts with the business. And of course, the user experience, and that's really more focused on the singular UI of some of those tools. And all of that really pulls into the customer experience. And that's the customer experience. I mean, we all have a sense of that, but that's a perception, that's a feeling, that's what somebody walks away from having gone through everything else. If you want to look at your total experience, it's a piece of all of those. A great example that we work with every day is around the omni-channel solution or an omni-channel strategy. So when we consider back to user personas, especially around generational preferences, a lot of users today want to start with a highly digital, low touch. They're going to want to start on a website, whether that's self-help pages, fulfillment, anything there. But if they're not able to get the information or the service that they want on their own, they may shift into another digital channel. The next kind of step is usually into a chat, and that's where we see chatbots really kicking in. And with that hyper automation, there's probably access to more solutions that with just a little bit of verification and some enhanced service there, the chatbot can take care of. And then past that, it really kicks through into a live contact, whether that's through a chat, a phone call, whatever's necessary, and really that can even be the follow-up on those. So as you go through that journey of from digital property through to the employee or the support organization, however it goes, you really want that experience to feel logical, a smooth transition, one step at a time, really always forward and never backwards.
Okay, great information. I did just want to point out real quick before we take our last couple of questions, if you would like to get in touch with Buchanan, I've went ahead and put our contact information on the screen. We encourage you to reach out to us and let us know how we can help you. That said, Chuck, I have a question for you. So when you talk about re-engineering the decision-making process, it seems like it might not be realistic. How can you advise companies on how to improve their decision-making?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I liken it as having to pick your battles, right? So it's going to be difficult for you to be able to improve on all three areas of being connected, contextual, and continuous all at once. So there's got to be a bit of a balance there. And I think what you can do is you can kind of take, I'm going to call it baby steps, right? So you can improve your connectedness by looking at your how the stakeholders are defined and just make some small improvements there. Contextually, you can look at what data you have that's available and see if there's any other readily available data that you can include in your decision-making process. And then from a continuous perspective, just continue to look at sort of the bigger picture of how things work. Ultimately, what we say is, just don't freeze, right? You can't just freeze and say we can't do this and curl up in a sort of in a little ball and hide from it. But what we need you to do is to make a decision, and you have to act upon it, and then work with the outputs of that decision.
All right, great information. Tyler, this question comes into you around that hyper automation that we touched on at the end of the presentation. So how do you see chatbots and Autobots evolving in the future to advance hyper automation in an organization?
I think it's going to be a natural progression. Technologies today must be made to work with other products, and that's even really in direct competition. If you want to stay relevant, if you want to be adopted, you just have to have that capability to integrate and to play well with everything else out there. So as we know that, past that, I think the biggest challenge is going to be identifying the problems that you want to solve. My advice there is to make sure that the thought leaders have a clear path into the front line. You can do that either by directly engaging and empowering your front line to provide the ideas for improvement, or it can be done by rolling up sleeves and getting into the trenches. In my experience, most of the best ideas are going to be born this way and not from around a boardroom table. Once you have the problem, think about the right solution. Don't focus on reusing an existing solution. Consider your entire toolkit and select the best one. And you might not even have that solution today. And that's where you go in and you find the right solution. But with the right composable business model, all those pieces are going to fit together. So I think the technology is going to continue to enable this, and it's really going to come down to having that understanding of your business to know what those problems are and where you have the most impact, and then act on it, like Chuck said.
Okay, great. Chuck, this one is for you regarding the smart workspaces that you touched on. So you mentioned Microsoft, Google, and AWS, but you also have Zoom, WebEx, and a variety of other tools. So what do you recommend?
Well, yeah, so it's an interesting sort of dilemma, and my comment goes back to trying to make sure we're not putting together a patchwork of solutions, but trying to make sure that we actually have a well-defined platform and a well-defined smart workspace. So I know of some organizations that were able to adopt Zoom very quickly, and but they're actually on Microsoft 365. So now they're using Zoom for their conferencing, and then they've got Teams for chat, and they've got SharePoint for their collaboration and that. And so to me, that's where a business leader has to step back and say, well, hold on a second. What are the tools that we have that make the most sense for us? From my perspective, I would migrate my users off of Zoom and into the Teams environment, because I've got the same functionality or better functionality, because now I've got only one set of logins. I've only got one platform. I can store all my documents in that platform. It boils down to what's that user experience, right? So how many places do they have to go to get to their data, or to get to their applications, or to collaborate with somebody? And that really affects the user's productivity. And then again, we talked about security. Security is paramount, especially in this day and age. So we need to make sure that we can secure the platforms, secure the tools, so that only the users that are authorized to use those tools and to access the data are given the right level of access.
Okay, that's really great information. I think the last question we're going to take today is for Tyler. So Tyler, you mentioned peer-based support. Can you explain how that works and how the shift affects the personas?
For sure. So I think that this is a really interesting topic. I think it's one that I could actually probably speak at length or really have a conversation around. I think there's a large pivot coming how we support our users and consumers, and I say that as somebody who works closely with support teams for many businesses. Uh, in the professional world, I think about channels like Teams or Slack, where you can ask your peers to support in a question in an open format, and then you get that benefit of everyone's collective knowledge on a topic. So back to Chuck's point just a minute ago around utilizing an application like Microsoft Teams. Of course, there's direct messaging and all that good stuff, but there's also that communal function of having those Teams channels. So being able to post a question there, that information stays public, it stays visible, and you're able to get input from many peers who probably have had this problem. And in the event they haven't, they may help you still come to the right solution, but that information then now becomes part of that communal knowledge for the next person who may have a similar problem or that exact same problem. So I think that being able to leverage that expertise from a specific user or work group, it's just incredibly powerful. I think organizations, though, and again, this is as somebody who leads support teams, I think there's going to be a retention of responsibility to make sure that there's a strategy, that there's still resources there to fact check and moderate that. We want to make sure that the information that goes out there stays on course, that it meets any compliance or security. We certainly don't want to bypass anything. We want to make sure that everything stays above board. But I think that that's the shift of today. The traditional service desk analyst may field a lot of, phone calls, emails, chats, tickets, things like that. Where in the future, those resources may begin to break away and just act as moderators for some of these public forums. I come back to, I think there's a real power in the wisdom of a crowd solution. And when it comes to streamlining support capabilities, I think it reduces some of the middle ground and really kind of gets, we see it in the consumer space so often where companies rely on giving badges or top contributor titles or things like that to some of their fans, and it creates brand evangelists or product evangelists to take away some of that support. It takes some of the pressure off the internal teams, frankly, and again, it just allows people to focus on those tasks. Your knowledge centered support principles come in big here, because you're going to have to make sure, again, to fact check that information. It's going to have to be stored, collected. You're really going to want to feed it back in as those topics are, as you see those trends and as those solutions come out. You want to make sure that goes into your self-healing and self-help tools, just to again make sure that it's rounded everywhere. And to go back to the user personas, I think that that's where we're going to see, as millennials for sure, but even going a step further into that Gen Z that's maybe just entering the workforce, coming through higher ed, just coming out of school. I think that they really thrive here. I mean, you like it or not, if you look at the example of the GameStop frenzy earlier this year through Reddit, right? It's the same idea where there was a peer authority that began to start a trend in information, and it gained this momentum really quick, and it influenced things. Like it's similar to Uber and all these areas that are just disrupting through crowdsourced solutioning. So I think it's here to stay. I think the user personas that are going to jump on it most heavily are those younger generations. So again, if your business model embraces that, or you want to be an early adopter in preparation of people really coming of age in the years coming, it's probably a good time to start to look at it. But you really can't shy away from taking away those channels that allow other users who that just may not be their thing. It goes back to what I said earlier. We want to create and embrace multiple channels so that each user has the ability to choose what's right for them versus what's right for us. So making sure that if somebody really prefers to pick up a phone and speak to somebody because that's their preference, that we still have that ability, or somebody that wants to fire off an email or even have a face-to-face support. We just want to make sure that all those channels stay available.
Absolutely. Well, that is some great insight, Tyler, and it definitely will be interesting to see how that, shapes up in the next couple of years or so. So that is it for today. Once again, if you would like to get in touch with Buchanan, our contact information is on the screen. Please reach out and let us know how we can help you. I want to once again thank Tyler and Chuck for spending some time with us today, and thank you so much to everyone who attended. This will be available on demand on our Bright Talk channel, so please check back there if you'd like to reference anything that we discussed today. And with that, we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much.